Hello, it's Monday, the 14th of March, and welcome to your 5-minute briefs from Seoul. I'm your host, Hee-Jin Koo. In our first briefing for March, we take a look at expectations for South Korea's President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's more corporate-friendly stance, how businesses are bracing for adverse effects of rising fuel prices amid global sanctions against Russia and its energy exports, and the latest efforts to resume daily routines to enter into an endemic phase of the COVID-19 pandemic despite record infection counts. Plus, we explore changes in the retail sector as Korean consumers go vegan and explore a wider variety of spirits, namely whiskey, as they seek more options in what they consume as meals at home during the pandemic. Let's begin our 5-minute roundup. South Korea elected People Power Party's Yoon Suk-yeol as the nation's 20th president, ushering in a minority government that will likely clash with an opposition with a supermajority that can railroad through legislations and hamper his administration at least for the first 2 years of his term. Yoon won the presidential election held on the 9th of March by a mere 0.8 percentage point, or 240,000 votes more than his closest rival Lee Jae-myung of the ruling Democratic Party, the slimmest of margins since 1987, when South Koreans began to choose their commander-in-chief through a direct voting format. The 61-year-old Yoon will be the first prosecutor general to be elected into office and the first ever South Korean president without any legislative or gubernatorial experience. Pundits anticipate Yoon to take a more enterprise-friendly approach than the incumbent Moon Jae-in. Yoon campaigned on a platform of lower capital gains and property ownership taxes, as well as pledging to build at least 2.5 million homes in the next 5 years to boost affordable housing. Yoon may also seek a more clearly defined stance for South Korea, abandoning its often strategic ambiguity between ties with Washington and Beijing through more active security dialogue. Yoon has also said he wants to add another U.S. terminal high-altitude area defense, or THAAD, system to counter North Korea and its nuclear threat, potentially risking new economic retaliation from China. In 2017, Moon deployed THAAD in South Korea, prompting backlash from China, its largest trading partner. Turning now to news on soaring fuel costs, gasoline prices in South Korea jumped for the 8th week on the back of a surge in global prices as the US and the international community at large banned Russia's exports of oil and other energy products to further isolate Moscow in response to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The average price of gasoline sold at pumps nationwide rose 97.61 to 1,861.61 per litre in the second week of March, while prices in Seoul topped the 2,000 mark for the first time in more than 8 years to 2,007.41 per litre on Friday. South Korea's benchmark crude oil shot up more than $16 or by 15% to close at $122.80 per barrel last week, while Brent crude oil jumped to nearly $140 earlier in the week. Asia's fourth largest economy, which relies on imports for more than 95% of its fossil fuel needs, announced last week it will extend its 20% fuel tax cut until July of this year, and possibly even expand the scope of fuel tax cuts in the future. As such, South Korean companies with business ties with Russia are starting to feel the brunt of Moscow's retaliatory measures after the Kremlin listed South Korea along with the US, the UK, the EU, Canada, Japan and Australia, as well as other nations, as unfriendly countries for joining in sanctions against Russia. The firms are finding it increasingly difficult to send or receive payments, and those operating plants there have been hit by parts and supply shortages. In response, the Seoul government is devising new solutions, including urging Koreans in Russia to make full use of local branches of Korean banks. The government said it will step up monetary and tax support for affected Korean businesses, including plans for a 2 trillion won financing package. It also plans to help firms find alternative export channels. Nevertheless, this throws a wrench into Korea's efforts for an economic recovery. Goldman Sachs has lowered South Korea's economic growth forecast for this year by some 40 basis points to 2.8% and raised this year's consumer price index outlook by some 60 basis points to 3.6%. It also forecasts the Bank of Korea will raise its key interest rate twice by the end of this year, up by 25 basis points each time. And regarding South Korea's efforts to recover from the global pandemic, the government is mulling steps to ease stringent social distancing mandates and help local businesses, even as daily infections hit yet another record over the weekend. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Saturday reported an all-time high of 383,665 in new COVID-19 cases. While the fatality rate still remains at 0.16%, President Moon Jae-in gave a somber address to the nation as its pandemic death toll surpassed 10,000 in just over 2 years since the first outbreak early in 2020. The overall cumulative infections has exceeded 6.5 million since the country reported its first outbreak. Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum projected that the Omicron wave currently sweeping the country will peak in around 10 days, with daily cases hovering around 370,000 and daily average infections ranging between 295,000 and 372,000 for the next few weeks. He stressed that the government will place top priority on reducing severe cases and deaths to increase their chances of recovery in the culminating period. Nevertheless, Kim said starting today, the government will allow hospitalized patients with underlying conditions that test positive for COVID-19 to receive treatment in general wards as part of efforts to ease the burden of frontline personnel and to begin entering an endemic phase in managing the outbreak. The government will also exempt inbound travelers who have completed their vaccinations and registered their history from the mandatory week-long self-isolation starting this coming 21st. The measure will include those who have passed 14 days and are within 180 days of receiving the second vaccine dose or a single dose for Johnson & Johnson, or those who have received the third dose or booster shot in Korea or abroad. And as we have noted in our previous episodes, the protracted pandemic has changed consumer trends. South Korean supermarket and online stores are increasing their stock of plant-based meat alternatives as younger and more environment-friendly customers seek healthier meal options and choose a vegan lifestyle that satisfies their yearning to coexist with nature and cut down on excessive carbon footprints. Others are braving the world of whiskey, once regarded as an exclusive drink for the older generation. According to data from the Agricultural Ministry's Food Information Statistics System, the number of food and other products that applied for and received vegan certifications jumped 44% on year to 286 items in 2021, a stellar increase from a mere 13 back in 2018. Global market research firm Statista also reported that demand for meat alternatives around the world will more than double to $30.9 billion by 2026, from an estimated $13.3 billion in 2020, expanding by an annual average of some 15%. CJ Jeoljadang is among local food brands that plans to focus on promoting its vegan line Planttable both domestically and abroad this year. Convenience stores such as GS25 and hypermarket giants such as E-Mart and HomePlus also announced they would be increasing their stock of vegan-friendly products this year. Whiskey importers are also enjoying a renewed appreciation for Scotch and Irish single malts and blends. Once regarded as a drink favoured only by the older and more established generation, an increasing number of millennials and Generation Zers have joined online clubs and communities that share information on their latest finds. Whiskey imports to Korea jumped 37% in 2021 on year to $154 million after dipping to a 21-year low of $132 million in 2020. That wraps it up for this episode of 5-Minute Briefs from Seoul. This has been Hee-Jin Koo for KBSI. Have a good day.